Hey everyone, I am Peter from Top Think, and today we are going to learn why you can't stop procrastinating. Now, let's begin. Procrastination is the enemy of anyone who wants to become successful, but most people do it all the time. The real question is this: why are you procrastinating, and what can you do to stop it? In fact, there are 12 main reasons why people procrastinate. You probably don't do all of them. You probably just do a few. However, they're holding you back. So, as we go through each of them, ask yourself this: am I doing this? And what can I do to change it? Number 1, fear of failure. Being afraid of failure can be devastating to self-discipline and productivity, motivating countless people to procrastinate or just give up before they've even started. This is especially common when working toward long-term goals and dreams, because we'd rather procrastinate than find out that we don't have what it takes to make these dreams come true. If you want to be a writer, you might be struggling to get started on that novel you've been talking about for years, because you're scared to discover that you aren't actually as talented as you thought. But if you let this fear govern your life, you'll spend years taking the easy road, missing out on all kinds of amazing opportunities. Not only that, but you'll never actually know how much potential you really have. Number 2, fear of success. While not as common as fearing failure, some procrastinators put off their work because they're afraid of success. Say that you do write that novel. What happens next? Will people start expecting all kinds of great things from you? Will your life get harder because you're successful? These kinds of questions are often enough to keep you from performing at your best, satisfied instead by just being good enough. But by fearing success, you're standing in your own way. If you have the talent and drive to find success, you are just as capable of keeping it. Number 3, lack of knowledge. Imagine you need to build a shed. You aren't that good with your hands, so you know you'll need to go online and do some research beforehand. You'll have to learn what each tool does, what materials you'll need, and even then, you'll still need quite a bit of help. For many people, learning new skills can be one of the biggest causes of procrastination. When we don't know how to do something, we tend to put it on a pedestal, imagining it as an insurmountable obstacle, even if it's as easy as hammering a nail into a piece of wood. The most motivated people can still procrastinate when they're forced to step outside their comfort zone. So, if you notice yourself doubting your own abilities, try to change your approach by thinking of it as experimenting. By aiming to simply give something a try, you can make unfamiliar territory seem far less intimidating. Number 4, boredom. No matter what you do or where you work, chances are you've run into a few projects that you've had absolutely no interest in doing. And it wasn't because they were too hard or too time-consuming. They were just plain boring. So you probably put off doing them as long as possible. When you face a problem like this, you should first try to find some aspect of the project that you can connect to, or some way to spin it to add a little bit of excitement. But that isn't always possible. So, if you're stuck writing a really bland essay or filling out stacks of paperwork, try using a just get it done mentality. Normally, when you're not interested in a task, you procrastinate because you have a hard time caring about the quality of whatever you're doing. With the just get it done mentality, your goal is to simply finish, even if it isn't your best work. Not only will this help you finish faster, but you'll find these boring jobs are a lot less stressful when you're not worried about exceeding expectations. Number 5, resistance. The world is full of people trying to tell you what to do. They'll ignore your opinions and hold you to impossibly high standards, yet society says you should do as you are told. However, the world is just as full of people who don't like being bossed around, so it's pretty common for individuals to procrastinate as a form of resistance or rebellion. The idea is pretty simple. Say your boss has given you an unfair amount of work to do and expects you to finish it all by tomorrow. People who struggle with authority will likely put it off, claiming that their boss had no right to assign them so much work. By doing this, procrastinators feel like they've reclaimed some power in the situation. Once tomorrow does come around and the work isn't done, the procrastinator will likely blame it on their boss instead of their own bad habits. If left unchecked, this behavior can hold you back personally and professionally. So, it's important to learn when to stand up for yourself and when to let someone else lead. Number 6. Poor role models. Another reason you might struggle with procrastination is because you've spent your entire life looking up to notorious procrastinators. Your role models, whether they're your parents, your teachers, or your favorite celebrities, can influence everything from your personality to your work ethic. You subconsciously emulate the people you admire. So, if your role models make a habit of stalling or postponing projects, there's a good chance you will too. Number 7. Past mistakes. When you've had a bad experience with something, it's natural for you to show some hesitation if you have to do it again. Humans are biologically programmed to avoid things that hurt us, mentally or physically, so we're much more likely to procrastinate when we're worried about repeating past mistakes. Let's say you tried public speaking for the first time in a while and your voice cracked really loudly during your presentation. If someone asked you to speak in public again, wouldn't you be worried about the same thing happening? One bad experience can be enough to make you avoid certain tasks forever, so it's important to challenge your own biases and prove yourself wrong. Number 8. Avoiding discomfort. Cognitive psychologists have speculated that procrastination may be caused by something called discomfort intolerance. Most people are taught from an early age that we should only do something when it feels physically and mentally comfortable. On the flip side, when something feels uncomfortable, we try to find ways to avoid it, which leads to procrastination. But, unfortunately, if you only ever did things you like, you'd never really get anywhere. A great way to increase your tolerance for discomfort is to pair it with something comfortable. Say you need to do some math problems, but math is not really your strong suit. After you complete a few problems, take a break and do something comfortable like watching a YouTube video or browsing social media. If you alternate between the two tasks, your mind will begin working faster to get to earn the reward. Number 9. Social expectations. Even if you aren't scared of failure, you may procrastinate because you're worried about what other people will think if you don't succeed. This puts so much pressure on someone that they end up giving up on their goals and dreams entirely. Let's say you're thinking of going to medical school like your mother, but you aren't sure if you have what it takes. You might have to come to terms with potentially failing, but you're so worried about what your parents would think that you decide not to even apply. If you find yourself in these kinds of situations, the best thing to do is sit down with the other person and let them know how the pressure is affecting you. Make sure to tell them you're doing your best, and most of the time, that'll be enough to earn their support. Number 10. Perfectionism. Take a moment to imagine the average perfectionist. What kind of work ethic do you think they have? Typically, people assume that all perfectionists are motivated, disciplined workers who have no problem investing hours into just about any project. But this isn't true of all perfectionists. In fact, some perfectionists are also consistent procrastinators, especially when they know a project isn't going to live up to their high standards. So, instead of jumping ship whenever something goes wrong, focus on completing projects within an allotted time. When your time runs out, you can take your hands off the wheel, knowing, no matter how it turns out, that you gave it your best shot. Number 11. Ignoring responsibilities. Have you ever found yourself thinking, if I just ignore it, maybe it will go away? While this wishful thinking doesn't really make any logical sense, it's a type of denial that leads many people to procrastinate everything from homework to household chores. If you walk by a sink full of dishes, for example, you might pretend that you don't see them just so you don't have to take responsibility. Once you do take responsibility for them, the issue becomes your problem, so people tend to put this off for as long as possible. The hope is that someone else will swoop in and get the job done, which spares you a few minutes of annoying work. While this sounds great in theory, by ignoring your responsibilities, you're creating more work for the people around you, making their lives that much more stressful. It's important to remember that you're not the only person who'd rather not be doing chores. So, don't let yourself become a burden on the people in your life. Number 12. Short-term gains. The last reason why you can't stop procrastinating is because you might be prioritizing short-term gains over long-term gains. A short-term gain is something like eating a piece of cake. It might be delicious now, but ultimately it's bad for your health. A long-term gain, on the other hand, would be eating something healthier like celery, which doesn't taste great, but is much better for you in the grand scheme of things. People often procrastinate their work because they'd rather get the immediate reward of a short-term gain, choosing to play video games or watch TV, instead of doing something boring that may benefit them in the future. It takes quite a bit of self-discipline to pick a boring task over a fun one. So, it's important to practice prioritizing long